Dogman in the Suburbs, 2023. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Hi, I'm a suburban husband and father that you can call Dave. I had a developing situation with what I realized was a dogman a while back, and I kind of initially went into shock. When my wife and I looked into buying this house, we studied the local schools, we looked into the crime rate, the taxes, we really did our homework. But we never thought the proximity to the nearby woods would place us in a situation where our children's lives, or even those of my wife and myself, might be in danger because of mythical supernatural monsters that turn out to be very natural after all. I was immobile for a few hours, but going into shock wasn't an option for me. I had to protect my family, but I didn't understand what I was dealing with. I started on the internet, looking up anything to do with werewolves and dogmen in modern America. And that's how I came across your program as well as a number of others. It came to me that these creatures, if they were really here in my area, would have also been seen and experienced by my neighbors, or at least by some of them. I decided I would get myself a small handheld digital recorder, and I would go around and start interviewing any neighbors who had seen anything strange. It's in my nature to ask questions when I want answers, so this is what I did. I went into this with the theory that humanity's destruction of the natural world is pushing dogmen out of the deep woods and into suburbia. I'm not sure the stories I got from people around here really bore that theory out, though. It turns out people around here have been seeing the dogman out on the edges of suburbia for generations. They just didn't go blabbing about it to the media, like UFO and Bigfoot witnesses did. Maybe because saying you saw a werewolf sounds just that much crazier than saying you saw a flying saucer. But just because something sounds crazy, it doesn't always mean that it is. So now I'm going to present edited down versions of a number of the dogman testimonials I've gathered from other suburbanites here in the area of northwestern Pennsylvania that I live in. I don't want to narrow it down further than that for privacy reasons. I will also be redacting the last names of all the witnesses for the same reasons. Let's start off with a pleasant real estate agent and homemaker I know who has her own dogman story. Narrative number 1. Martha's Dogman. Well, hello there. My name's Martha. I live in a quiet little neighborhood where the most excitement we usually get is the annual bake sale at the community center. But I'm not here to talk about apple pies and chocolate chip cookies. No, I've got a story that'll curl your hair and make your blood run cold. It was about 6 months ago, in the wee hours of the morning. I'm a light sleeper, I always have been. That night I was having a fitful sleep, tossing and turning, when I heard a tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap it went, like someone was knocking on the window. Now I live alone, and there's no tree or anything near that window, so you can imagine how that sound set my heart racing. I sat up in bed, straining my eyes to see in the dark, but I noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The tapping had stopped, but there was a new sound, a low growl, like a dog, but deeper, more guttural. I've never heard anything like it before, and I wasn't sure where the sound was coming from. It scared the bejesus out of me, I can tell you that. I got up, my knees shaking like they didn't want to do what I was telling them to do, and I tiptoed over to that window. I didn't want to look, but I had to know what was out there. I pulled back the curtain just a smidge, and what I saw, Lord, I wish I hadn't seen. There, in the moonlight, stood a creature like something from a horror movie. It was tall, taller than any man I've ever met, and covered in thick, dark fur. But the most terrifying part was its head. It was a dog head, but on a man's body. Its eyes glowed in the dark, and it was staring right at me. I screamed then, and the creature, it just turned and ran off into the night. I called the police, but by the time they got here, there was no sign of it. The cops told me they found a set of large paw prints in the dirt under the window, and that I probably just saw a large wolf leaning against the wall to look in at me. I asked them if they ever heard about a wolf doing that before, standing up and looking in windows. They just shook their heads and told me I wouldn't want to know the kinds of stories they had heard about wolves, and that I should make sure to lock my windows and doors at night. I don't sleep much these days. Every little sound makes me jump. But I know what I saw, and I know I'm not crazy. There's something out there in our quiet little neighborhood. Something that's not supposed to exist. And I pray every night that it doesn't come back. Number 2, Eduardo and the Dogman. Hello my friends, my name is Eduardo. I am an old man and English is not my first language, so please forgive any mistakes. I want to tell you about a terrifying experience I had just the other week. I was walking my little Chihuahua Pepito around our neighborhood. It was a quiet night. The moon was shining brightly, and the air was cool. Suddenly I heard a low growl. I turned around and saw a creature that I will never forget. It was taller than any man I'd ever seen, with a body covered in thick, dark fur. But the most terrifying part was its head, because it was like a dog head, but much larger, with sharp, gleaming teeth and glowing red eyes. It was a dogman, a creature from the stories my grandmother used to tell me, from when she lived down south. I felt a cold wave of fear wash over me. My heart was pounding in my chest like a drum. I picked up Pepito and I ran as fast as my old legs could carry me. My little dog was squirming in my arms, whimpering and shaking. I knew we had to get away. I could hear the dogman growling and chasing us. I could feel its hot breath on my neck, but I didn't dare to look back. When I reached the gate to our property, I gently tossed Pepito over the fence, then jumped in myself. In spite of the fact that our fence is no more than 3.5 feet high, the dogman stopped at the edge of our property and did not follow us past the gate. I have no explanation for that. Maybe you can tell me why it did that. Finally, we reached our front door. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking, and managed to unlock the door. I rushed inside and slammed it shut behind us. Safe inside, I looked out the window. The dogman was standing at the edge of our yard, its red eyes glowing in the darkness. It was even more terrifying when you took a minute to observe it. The creature had fur that was matted and dirty, and its teeth were long and sharp. We watched each other through the window for a minute, then the beast turned and disappeared into the night. I held Pepito close, feeling his little heart beating fast. I was shaking, but I was also filled with a strange sense of relief. We had escaped the dogman. We were safe. But I will never forget that night. The fear, the chase, the sight of that terrifying creature. It has changed our life drastically. Pepito only gets walked during the day now, and at night, I'm training him to use his new wee-wee pad. Curse you, dogman. Number 3. French, Loretta, and the Dogman. As you know, I enjoy walking my poodle outside. It's fun for both of us. I used to most enjoy walking her in the cool evenings, but I no longer feel safe doing so since I saw the dogman in our own neighborhood. It happened one nice evening earlier in the summer. As I was strolling along the dimly lit streets with my precious little poodle, a sense of tranquility enveloped me. The night was calm, and the moon cast a gentle glow upon the pavement. Suddenly, out of the shadows, a low growl pierced the silence, sending shivers down my spine. My heart raced as I turned to see a creature unlike anything I had ever encountered before. The dogman stood tall on its hind legs, towering over us with its muscular frame. Its fur was a dark matted brown, and its eyes glowed with an eerie intensity. Its snout was elongated, revealing sharp, glistening teeth that seemed to glow in the moonlight. The creature's wolf-like ears twitched with every sound, giving it an uncanny sense of awareness. This had to be the Loup-Garou my mother told me about. He is a wizard who can change forms. It was like some mix between a dog and a bear, something you'd never see in a zoo. Yet it looked so much like a real animal at the same time. I can't tell you its nature. I can only tell you its form. And it looked like a dog-headed bear man. Panic gripped me as the dogman lunged toward us, its growls growing louder and more menacing. I scooped up my trembling poodle, feeling its tiny body squirming in my arms. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I raced back home, my heart pounding with each step. Once safely inside my house, I peered through the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature that had caused such terror. In the dim light I could see the Loup-Garou lurking in the distance, its eyes still burning with an otherworldly intensity. Its fur was unkempt, matted with dirt and leaves, and its claws were long and sharp, glinting in the moonlight. As I observed the creature from the safety of my home, fear washed over me once again. Its presence felt evil, as if it possessed an ancient primal power. I couldn't help but imagine the horrors that could have befallen us if we hadn't made it back inside in time. I don't think that was just an animal. I think evil has come to our town, and it's changed how I live my life, and changed the dreams that I have at night. Number 4. Dogman bothers a family. Alright, here goes. I'm just a plain man, ain't got much to say. But I gotta tell you about this creepy old dogman monster that's been bothering me and my kin. First time I seen it I was out back, fixing the fence. Caught a glimpse of something big and hairy out the corner of my eye. Turned around and there it was, peeking over the fence, eyes glowing like 2 hot coals. Scared the daylights out of me, I tell you. Second time it was late at night. I was up, couldn't sleep, and I heard this scratching at the window. I go to look, and there it is again, that dang dogman staring in at me. I hollered and jumped up and down and it ran off, but it left me shaking like a loose window shutter in a bad storm. Third time, my little girl comes running in from playing outside, white as a sheet. Says she's seen the dogman watching her from the woods. I went out there with my shotgun, but it was gone. Still, I ain't letting her play outside alone no more. Fourth time, I was driving home late from work, and I seen it in the rear view mirror following my truck. I floored it, and I lost it, but it gave me a good scare first. Last time, just yesterday, I was out in the barn and I hear this growling sound. I turn around and there it is, the dogman, watching me from the shadows. I chased it off, but I know it'll be back. It's always watching, always waiting. I don't know what it wants, but it's got me and my family living in fear. Number 5. The old lady and her mother's tale of the dogman. Alright, dearie, sit down and let me tell you a story my mama told me when she was just a wee girl. It's about the dogman, a creature she saw thrice when she was carrying me in her belly. Now, don't you go getting scared, 'cause in our family we believe the dogman is a sign of good times and plenty. The first time she saw him, she was hanging the laundry out back. She said he was standing at the edge of the woods, tall as a man, but covered in fur, with a dog's head. He didn't do nothing, just watched her. She was scared, but she felt a strange peace, too. The second time she was walking home from the market, it was getting dark out and there he was, standing in the middle of the road. She said he had glowing eyes, but they weren't mean or anything. He just watched her. Then he turned and walked into the woods. That night she felt me kick for the first time. The third and last time she was in the kitchen making supper. She looked out the window and there he was, watching from the edge of the yard. She said he had a kind look in his eyes like he was watching over us. That night, she dreamt of a bountiful harvest and a healthy baby. A few months later I was born, healthy as a horse and strong as an ox. So you see, dearie, the dogman ain't nothing to be scared of. In our family, we see him as a sign of good times to come, a symbol of fertility and plenty. So if you ever see him, don't you go running. Just nod your head, say your thanks, and know that good times are on their way. Story number 6. The Old Man and the Pet Disappearances. Well, let me tell you, back when I was just a young one, something strange happened in our quiet little suburb. It was a time I'll never forget, and it all started with that monstrous dog-headed creature I saw one late afternoon. I was just a kid, see, and I was at school just like any other day. But that day something caught my eye. There, at the edge of the woods behind the school, I saw it. A huge dog-headed monster man, just walking along the tree line. It was bigger than anything I'd ever seen, and it sent a chill down my spine. Now, nobody else saw it, mind you. Just me. And I didn't say nothing about it, 'cause who'd believe a kid, right? But then something else happened. Pets started disappearing. Dogs, cats, even a couple of rabbits. All gone just like that, in the week following my sighting of that creature. Now, nobody else saw what I saw, and so nobody else made that connection. They just thought it was some wild animal or maybe a thief. But I always wondered, I always wondered if those pets might have fallen victim to that nomadic dogman that I saw. It's something that stuck with me all these years, and I expect it always will, too. Number 7. The Gym Teacher and the Werewolf. Alright, listen up, I'm a local gym teacher who lives in this neighborhood. And have I got a story to tell you. And now I know you probably expect that I'm just some old jock who likes to blow his whistle and make kids run laps, but I have seen things. Things that would make your hair stand on end. The first time was about 2 years ago. It was a crisp early fall day just like today. The leaves were just beginning to turn, and the air had that sharp bite to it. I was out on the field with a bunch of America's future leaders, running drills, when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. There at the edge of the woods was this thing. I want to call it a dog, but it was big. Bigger than any dog I'd ever seen. I mean, it had the head of a dog, but the body of a hairy monster man. And it was just standing there, watching us. I didn't know what to do, so I ran into the school and got the principal. We both went outside, and sure enough, it was still there. But when it saw us, it took off into the woods. We chased it, but the monster man was too fast. We couldn't catch it. That proves it wasn't someone in a costume, because sooner or later we'd have caught up with him. He'd have gotten the monster suit stuck on a tree, or he'd trip over his monster feet or something. The fact that that beast was able to speed away through uncertain wild terrain indicates to me that he was born to that forest, not to our world. The next time was just last year. It was the same thing, the same creature. But this time it didn't run when it saw us. It just stood there, staring forward at the kids playing. I got a good look at it this time. It was covered in thick, matted fur. And its eyes were the most terrifying part. They were bright yellow, and they seemed to glow in the dim light. It had a long snout, and its teeth, they were sharp, like a wolf's. But then it saw that we adults had seen it, and it took off again. I don't know what it is, or why it's watching our kids, but I know one thing for sure. That creature, that dogman, it's real, and it's out there, in those woods. So stay alert, kids. You never know what you might see. Number 8. The Plumbers and the Dogman. Alright, so there I was, me and my partner Dave, driving down the old country road on our way to fix Mrs. Henderson's leaky faucet. I'm Joe, by the way, your friendly neighborhood plumber. Now, I ain't one for tall tales, but what happened that day, well, it's something I can't quite explain. Now, me and Dave were just talking about the previous night's game when, out of nowhere, this thing darts out in front of the van. I swear on my mother's grave it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was tall, real tall, and covered in fur. But the thing that got me was its head. It was like a dog's head, but on a man's body. I slammed on the brakes so hard we nearly skidded off the road. Dave and I just sat there for a minute, hearts pounding, staring at where the creature had disappeared into the woods. We didn't say a word the whole way to Mrs. Henderson's. I mean, what could we say? We'd just seen a dogman, for crying out loud. No, we ain't told anyone about this. You see, people around here already give us a hard time, because we kinda look like those plumbers from that old ghost hunting TV show. If we start talking about seeing Dogman, well, we'd never hear the end of it. But I swear it's the truth. And every time I drive down that old country road, I can't help but look over at those woods, half expecting to see that Dogman again. Okay, now it's back to me, Dave, the guy who collected all these testimonials for you. Now I think it's high time I let you in on my family's personal story, so that you understand what set me off in this direction to start with. Now, I'm just a regular guy, you know. I got a wife, couple of kids, nice little house in the burbs. But I'll be damned if I didn't have the scare of my life, not too long ago. It was a regular Tuesday night. I was out back grilling some burgers for dinner. Kids were playing in the yard. Wife was inside setting the table. Out of nowhere, I see this. I wouldn't even known what to call it back then. Big as a bear, but it wasn't no bear. Had the head of a dog, but it was standing on two legs. I tell you, I'd never been so scared in my life. I yelled for the kids to get inside. And this thing, this dogman, it just stared at us. And then it turned and ran off into the woods. I didn't sleep a wink that night, I tell you. I kinda went into a state of shock like I told you before. But then I began my search for information. Then I interviewed those people whose testimonials you just heard. The thing that solved the problem for us was something I got from one of your old videos. See, the Dogman isn't afraid of much, but he is afraid of being photographed. So if you surround your property with trap cameras, then they will either go away, or you will get proof of the Dogman. And that sounds like a win-win scenario to me. So next day after learning that, I went out and bought every camera I could afford. Video cameras, still cameras, motion activated, remotely activated, you name it. It cost me almost 2 months' salary, but I would have only spent that money on food and medical expenses anyway, so who cares, right? And then I spent the whole weekend setting them up, covering every inch of my property. I wasn't gonna let that thing come anywhere near my family again. And you know what? Since I set up those cameras, we haven't seen hide nor hair of that Dogman. Not just us either. Nobody in our immediate neighborhood has seen it since. Maybe he was scared off by the cameras, or maybe it just moved on. Either way, I'm just glad my family is safe. So that's my story. It's just a story of a guy like you, who wanted to protect his family. And if that means setting up a bunch of cameras to scare off a Dogman, then so be it. Now I'll pass the mic to your old pal Bigfoot. Biggie? You won't find a nicer EP than Deborah If you look from now to February. Yes, I just rhymed Deborah with February, leave me alone. I'm trying to say thank you and welcome back to Deborah Darcy, who just rejoined our channel memberships. Deborah gets to see our secret uncensored episodes, as well as our over 25 hours of secret uncensored archives. 7 Dogmen I Have Seen. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Greetings, dear reader. My name is Harold, and I am an elderly gentleman who has lived a life that is perhaps more extraordinary than most in at least one way. You see, I have had the unique and somewhat terrifying privilege of encountering a creature known as Dogman or Wolfman on more than a handful of occasions. A Dogman, for those unfamiliar, is a Midwestern creature of legend and lore. A beast that walks on 2 legs like a man, but bears the unmistakable features of a canine. Its body is muscular and covered in thick fur. Its eyes glow with an eerie intelligence. And its head, well, its head is that of a wolf, complete with a snout and sharp, menacing teeth. My encounters with these creatures have been both fascinating and terrifying, and I have decided to share my experiences in this collection of personal remembrances. Each encounter has left an indelible mark on my life, shaping me into the man I am today. The first of these encounters took place in the year 1952, a time when I was just a young boy of 8, full of youthful curiosity and courage. Little did I know, my life was about to take a turn into the realm of the weird. I remember it as if it were yesterday, even though it happened 71 years ago now. I was just a boy of 8, living a simple life with a family of normal people in the heartland of America. Now, if you don't know what a normal human being was, consult your history books. My older sister Martha and I were sitting at the kitchen table, engrossed in one of our usual sibling chats, disagreeing over which were the best singers and radio shows. The sun had set, and the only light in the room was the warm glow from the incandescent overhead lamp. Suddenly a chill ran down my spine, as if someone had walked over my grave. I remember the hair on the back of my neck standing up, a sense of dread washing over me. I glanced at Martha, and I could see she felt it too. We both turned toward the window, and what we saw next has haunted me for the rest of my life. There, pressed against the glass, was a face unlike anything we'd ever seen. It was a monstrous visage, a grotesque blend of man and beast. Its eyes were a piercing yellow, glowing in the dim light, and its snout was long and wolf-like. But what struck me the most were its ears, tall and pointed, like those of a German shepherd, but far more menacing. I remember the breath hitching in my throat. I remember my heart pounding like a drum. Martha screamed, a high-pitched, terrified sound that echoed through the house. The creature, this Dogman, as it came to be known, tilted its head, as if curious, its eyes never leaving ours. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, leaving behind only the echo of our terror, and the chilling imprint of its face on the window. Now, I never saw that particular Dogman again, but he was the first of a number that I would see. My second Dogman encounter. You know, the memories of my youth are as vivid as the day they occurred. It was 1957, the day after my bar mitzvah. I was 13, a newly minted man in the eyes of my faith, and I decided to take a solitary walk in the woods to reflect on my newfound responsibilities. Little did I know I was about to encounter something that would forever change my perception of the world. The woods were quiet that day, the only sound being the rustling of leaves under my feet, and the occasional chirping of a bird. I was lost in thought when a movement in the distance caught my eye. I squinted, trying to make out what it was, and then I saw it. The Dogman, the creature that had haunted my dreams since that frightful night in 1952. This time, however, I was not paralyzed by fear. I was at a safe distance, and the creature seemed unaware of my presence. I took the opportunity to observe it, to really see it. I thought the head was the most striking feature. It was wolf-like, with a broad snout, filled with sharp teeth. Its eyes were a piercing yellow, glowing eerily in the dim light of the forest. It had a wild, untamed look about it, a primal energy that was both terrifying and fascinating. The body was equally imposing. The shoulders were massive, like those of a seasoned football player. They were broad and muscular, rippling with raw power. The creature's fur was a dark, matted mess, adding to its intimidating presence. It stood on two legs, its posture eerily human-like. It was a sight to behold, a creature of nightmares and folklore standing right before my eyes. I watched it for what felt like an eternity, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, disappearing into the depths of the forest. I was left standing there, my mind reeling from what I just witnessed. It was my second encounter with the Dogman, and was just as terrifying and awe-inspiring as the first one. My third Dogman encounter. The year was 1964, a time of change and transition for me. I had just returned from military duty, eager to embrace the quietude of civilian life. Little did I know an encounter awaited me that would shake me to my core. It was the first week of my return. I was trying to adjust to the silence of the night, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the battlefield. I was lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard a rustling outside my window. It was a sound that brought about a feeling of déjà vu. It was a sound that sent chills down my spine. With a sudden surge of courage, I decided to confront whatever was lurking outside. I threw open the window with a loud bang, hoping to startle the intruder. And startle it I did. The creature that had been hiding in the shadows was none other than a Dogman, a kind of a beast I had encountered twice before. As the monster turned to flee, I got a clear view of it from behind. Its body was massive, like a hulking football player, with broad shoulders that rippled with strength. Its fur was a mottled gray, thick, matted, covering its body like a shaggy coat. Its hind legs were muscular and strong, built for speed and agility. The tail was long and bushy, swaying wildly as the creature sprinted away. But what struck me the most again was that creature's head. It looked like a wolf's head, but more primitive somehow, with large pointed ears that stood erect. It had a wild, untamed look about it that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. As I watched the Dogman disappear into the night, I was left with a sense of unease. But there was also a strange sense of respect. Here was a creature, a cryptid, living on the fringes of our world, a reminder of the mysteries that still exist in the corners of our reality. My next Dogman encounter. The year was 1972. I was a young man of 28, full of vigor and life. I was returning from a long drive when I noticed a flat tire on my old Chevy. I remember it was a chilly evening, the kind that sends shivers down your spine even before anything spooky happens. As I was wrestling with the stubborn lug nuts, I heard a rustling in the nearby bushes. I paused, my heart pounding in my chest. I had seen the Dogman thrice before, and each encounter was etched into my memory. I picked up the tire iron, my only defense handy, and I waited. Suddenly the creature emerged from the shadows. It was a sight to behold, a towering figure with the head of a wolf and the body of a man. Its eyes glowed in the dim light, and it bared its teeth, letting out a guttural roar that echoed through the silent night. I stood my ground, gripping the tire iron tightly. The creature advanced, its massive paws crunching the gravel beneath. I could see the muscles ripple under its fur, its claws gleaming ominously. With a swift movement, I swung the tire iron at the creature. It let out a surprised yelp and backed away, its eyes never leaving mine. I continued to wave the tire iron, creating a barrier between us. The creature seemed to understand that I was not going down without a fight. It must have decided that I was too much trouble, though, because with one last roar, it turned and disappeared into the darkness. I was left standing there, my heart pounding in my chest, the tire iron still clutched in my hand. The encounter was brief, but it was enough to remind me of the raw strength and primal fear that the dogman can instill. This was my fourth encounter with the creature, but it was far from the last. My fifth encounter with the dogman. The year was still 1972. It was the same year I had encountered the dogman on the highway while changing a flat tire. Little did I know that encounter was not the end of it. The beast had followed me home, a fact that sent chills down my spine and filled my heart with dread. I remember it was a quiet evening. My wife and our young daughter were in the living room, their laughter filling the house. Suddenly a low growl echoed from outside, instantly silencing the mirth. I knew right away what it had to be. That dogman had found me. I could see the fear in my wife's eyes, the confusion on my daughter's face. I knew I had to act. I grabbed that same tire iron I'd used to defend myself on the highway. It felt heavy in my hands, a symbol of the impending confrontation. I stepped outside, the cold night air biting at my skin. The creature was there, its massive form illuminated by the porch light. It was even more terrifying seeing it on my property, its wolf-like face twisted into a snarl, its massive shoulders hunched, as if ready to pounce. I stood my ground, my grip on the tire iron tightening. I yelled at the beast, my voice echoing. I banged the iron against the ground, creating a loud metallic clang. The creature flinched, its ears flattening against its head. I continued to make noise, my heart pounding in my chest. To my surprise, the creature began to back away, its snarl fading into a low growl. I continued to yell and bang the tire iron on anything hard I could see, my fear replaced by a surge of adrenaline. Slowly the creature turned and retreated into the darkness, its massive form disappearing from view. I stood there for a moment, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I had done it. I had defended my family and my home. The dogman was gone, and I hoped he would never return. My sixth dogman encounter. The sixth encounter. A tale that still sends shivers down my spine. It was 5 years after the multiple incidents of 1972. My old army buddy Jack and I decided to take a camping trip in the Black River State Forest in Wisconsin. We were both seasoned outdoorsmen, and we preferred the solitude of off-trail camping. We had set up camp in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines and the gentle murmur of the Black River nearby. The first couple of days were uneventful, filled with fishing, hiking, and reminiscing about our army days. But on the third night, our peaceful retreat was shattered. We were sitting by the fire, the darkness of the forest pressing in around us, when we heard a rustling in the underbrush. We both froze, our conversations dying in our throats. I had told my friend the stories of the Dogman, but after my previous encounters, I had hoped I would never cross paths with one ever again. Suddenly, the creature burst into the clearing, its eyes glowing in the firelight. It was massive, standing on two legs like a man, but with the head and the fur of a wolf. Its shoulders were broad and muscular, like a football player, and its claws dug into the earth as it moved. Jack and I jumped to our feet, our hearts pounding. We were both veterans trained to face danger, but this was unlike any enemy Jack had ever encountered before. I grabbed a burning branch from the fire, and Jack picked up a large rock. We stood our ground, shouting and waving our makeshift weapons at the beast. The Dogman snarled, its teeth gleaming in the firelight, but it didn't advance. We continued our display, our voices echoing through the forest. After what felt like an eternity, the Dogman finally backed down. He gave us one last menacing growl, before disappearing back into the darkness. Well, I can't speak for Jack, but I didn't sleep that night. At the first light of dawn, we packed up our camp and we left. This was a reminder of the wild and unpredictable nature of the Dogman, a creature that continues to haunt my memories and my life to this day. My seventh and most recent encounter with a Dogman. Well, this was a day I'll never forget. It was during the pandemic, a time when the world was already filled with fear and uncertainty. I was driving to a big box retailer to pick up some supplies. The day was overcast, the sky a gloomy gray, matching the mood of the world around me. As I was driving down the highway, my eyes caught a movement in my peripheral vision. There along the highway was a creature that I had not seen in many years, a creature that I had hoped to never see again. A Dogman. The sight of it sent a chill down my spine, a feeling of terror that I hadn't felt in quite some time. The creature was massive, its fur a dark matted mess, its eyes glowing with a predatory gleam. It was then that it decided to give chase. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed the accelerator, the engine roaring in response. The creature was fast, much faster than I remembered, and not only was it keeping pace, but it was gaining on me. I could see it in my rearview mirror, its massive form bounding after my car. The terror I felt was indescribable, a primal fear that gripped me and wouldn't let go. It was only the sight of oncoming traffic that finally scared the beast off. It veered off into the woods, disappearing from sight, but not from mind. To this day, that encounter remains my most recent experience with a Dogman. The memory of it still haunts me, a reminder of the monsters that lurk in the shadows. But I know that I am not alone in my experiences, and I hope that by sharing my stories, others will come forward with their own. For the Dogmen are still out there, and who knows when they will choose to reveal themselves again. As I type the last lines of this collection, I can't help but feel a sense of unease. Not because I'm afraid, but because I am certain that my encounters with the Dogman are far from over. I have lived in this area for my entire life, and I have seen things that most people wouldn't believe. I have looked into the eyes of the Dogman. I have heard its growls. I have felt its presence. I am convinced that there is still a breeding population of these creatures in my vicinity. The signs are all there. The eerie howls in the night, the large paw prints in the mud, the strange sightings by others in my community. I believe these creatures are more than just figments of my imagination, or the result of overactive minds. They are real, and they are here. I have a feeling I might see that old Dogman again, possibly very soon. But until then, I will continue to live my life, always keeping an eye out for the unexpected, always ready for the next encounter. So, dear listener, remember this. The world is full of mysteries, And sometimes those mysteries come knocking at your door. When they do, don't be afraid. Stand tall, face them head on, and live to tell the tale. After all, life is nothing without a little adventure. Until we meet again, stay safe and keep your eyes open. You never know when you might have your own encounter with the Dogman. Your finger bones are called phalanges, and Angie's list is now called Angie. Someone please help me. Angie has donated again, and I can't think of anything else that rhymes with her name. Seriously, please join me in thanking Angie K for donating to us using the thanks button under each of our YouTube videos, and thereby making this episode a little bit more possible. Angie also leaves nice comments on our Rumble page, which I forgot we even had until she started leaving messages there. Yeah, apparently we are also on Rumble. Werewolf Problems 2023 Part 1 Werewolf in the Backyard. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I had owned my modest country home in northern Michigan that my wife and I continued to live in for 17 years without ever seeing a dogman or believing in any of the stories. I had always thought it was just local folklore, something to tell around the campfire to scare the kids. But then one day in mid-July earlier this year, I experienced something that changed my mind forever. I was outside in my yard at dawn, mowing the lawn before the day got too hot for this old man to be exerting himself, when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was moving through the trees, quickly and quietly. I stopped mowing and I looked closer. At first I thought it was a prowler, and I guess it was, but it wasn't a human prowler. It was definitely a dogman. This was the biggest and most muscular creature I had ever seen. I would say almost absurdly muscular. It stood at least 10 feet tall and was all ripped, to a ridiculous degree. Arnold Schwarzenegger would have bowed down to this guy and shouted, "I'm not worthy," like Wayne and Garth. If you don't get that reference, ask anyone over 80 to explain it to you. This creature's fur was a dark reddish brown, and its eyes were bright yellow. Those eyes were the most incredible part. They were like someone strung Christmas lights inside his skull. They were bright golden lights shining out of the darkness under the pronounced ridge over his eyes. It was hard not to stare back into them, but I know better than to stare back at any kind of predatory animal. I'm assuming this was a hunter's scavenger, because you don't need fangs like that to eat rabbit food. I completely froze in absolute terror, like I'd never known before. It was as though all of a sudden this steamy hot July morning became a chilly Halloween night inside of 2 seconds, and I was literally shivering. I don't think I ever felt like I was gonna die before. But that creature was so huge, so fast, and well coordinated, so powerful and agile. It could have done anything it wanted to do to me, and I wouldn't have been quick or strong enough to do the slightest thing about it. That was a horrible feeling that I had never experienced before. Other than my parents and some pets passing on, I hadn't truly faced death. I never served in the military and I'd never been mugged, so I don't think I ever really confronted my own mortality before. It wasn't until that moment that I realized what a lucky life I've led. It's just that I also realized in that instant that my luck seemed to have run out. I was as fascinated with this creature as I was scared of it. Its fur was short and sleek. It had a powerful musky odor. His muscles were defined and bulging, and its veins were visible underneath and through its fur. It had a long muscular tail that it swished back and forth as it walked. Its teeth were long and sharp, and its claws were razor-like. Its eyes were bright, golden, and intelligent. I still have nightmares about that dogman sometimes. I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. I can see its golden yellow eyes and hear its deep, rumbling growl. The dogman stopped moving and stared at me for a long moment. Then, it started to walk toward me, and I screamed like a pathetic child. It was not a proud moment. Most people get this out of their system when they're young, so that when they face death as a man, they can do it with bravery and intelligence. I reverted to an infantile weeping state, and my behavior was anything but heroic. You could have made a slapstick comedy out of my reaction to what happened on that morning. I turned and ran clumsily toward my house at the top speed I could muster, but the dogman was easily faster. It was gaining on me even as I ran, but it was just walking, while I was running at my absolute fastest. I reached my house and fumbled for my keys as I heard the dogman crunching anything his feet landed on as he finished coming up behind me. I finally got the door open and ran inside. I slammed that door shut and locked it with the confused-looking beast man right on the other side. If he had understood what I was doing, he likely could have stretched out his tree trunk arm and prevented me from closing the door. Fortunately, the creature had no idea what I was doing or what was happening, so he let me get away and lock all 3 door locks behind me. I stood there panting, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe what was happening, and I was blubbering pathetically. I'm very glad my wife was still up in bed and didn't see any of this. It was not me at my best. I was shaking all over, and my face was stained with tears, as if I were a teenage girl in a horror movie. I like to think I'd behave more like a grown-up if I had to deal with this beast man again, but I will not lie about how badly I failed in that first encounter. I walked over to a window and I peeked out like a little chicken. The dogman was standing in my yard, staring at my house. It was so big it was hard to miss out there. I ran and got my cell phone from upstairs and I tried to find it from the windows up there. I wanted to take a photo, but I couldn't find it from the second floor. Heading back downstairs, I discovered I still couldn't see the dogman from any of the windows, and I wasn't really sure it hadn't left. It sure didn't feel like it had left, though. It still felt like I was being watched. I was even tempted to go out back and look around, but I was too paranoid. I figured it might be right outside waiting to ambush me, and that I wouldn't be safe out there, but I don't know if I was being silly or not. I drew all the curtains closed and stayed away from the windows for the rest of the morning. I was too afraid to go back outside until my wife got up, and she went out back to put my lawnmower away. I couldn't let her put herself at risk, so I pulled her back into the house, and I went outside and finished mowing the lawn like a grown-up. The creature was probably gone, but if it were still there, it was only watching me from the woods, not chasing me around any longer. I've been somewhat honest with my wife about all this, and I don't know exactly if she believes me. I mean, she does see this as a real problem for me, but I think she sees it as a midlife crisis, and she probably thinks that I imagine the dogman. She got me this weightlifting machine, which must have cost her a big bundle. We have it set up in the basement now, and I have been using it. Even if I contacted A-Rod himself and got all the best steroids, I don't think I will ever be as bulked up as that Giga Chad dogman that I got chased by on that morning. But my wife is right that it has made me feel a little bit more in control of my own destiny again. I might never be strong enough to fight a dogman, but I do feel like I can handle myself better than before. Heck, I'm in better shape now than I ever was when I was younger, and I've only been working out for 6 or 7 weeks at this point. So, I'm hopeful again about life, for better or worse. Well, I mean, it's hard to be hopeful in 2023, obviously, but I do feel better able to handle the abuses that are being dished out to middle-class people like my family. And the only reason I've started to get more serious about my life at this late stage of it is because of the Dogman. Hey, if you're looking to frighten guests who use your bathroom, we're going to tell you about our new scary Dogman shower curtain later in the show. But right now it's time for our second story about a 2023 Dogman problem. And this one is called The Dogman in My Family's Mausoleum. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'm finding out a little more each week, it seems, about people who say dogmen or werewolves or whatever these things are seem to have a special love for cemeteries. I have a story that is driving me crazy, which happened to me and my family. I say it's driving me crazy because I can't wrap my mind around it. The whole thing just doesn't make sense to me. And I wake up 5 mornings out of 7 thinking about how it somehow seems illogical. There's something about that incident which I'm either misunderstanding or misled about, because it doesn't really all fit into place in my mind. I'll tell you everything I remember about that morning, and hopefully you'll understand my confusion about the events of that day. So my family drove out to a cemetery on the morning of August 1st, which was my 23rd birthday this year. That wasn't why we were driving to the cemetery. My birthday this year also fell sadly on the 1-month anniversary of my Uncle Wolfram's passing. He was a great guy that we all loved in different ways and for different reasons. He had been born in Germany, but moved here in the 1950s when he was still a teenager to live with relatives and become an American. We only got to see him on holidays, but we saw him every holiday, and he made it much more special for us with his scary stories that he had for us kids to hear just before our bedtime. His thick German accent made the stories sound much more exotic and possibly real to me when I was a kid, and I still respected him and his genuine warm presence as I grew up. I began to feel like we were becoming genuine friends when he passed so suddenly and so unexpectedly. To my family, it was like the death of a much younger person. Uncle Wolfram hadn't gotten to the point of slowing down yet, when suddenly he was gone, so it was a tough thing for each of us to cope with. Uncle Wolfram was interred in our family's mausoleum, which is pretty filled up by now. I mean, if I live to be old, they're gonna have to cremate me just to fit me inside there. They might need to compress my ashes, too. It's a crowded place inside that mausoleum. I had only been in there one time, and that was when they moved Uncle Wolfram's coffin in there, and some religious guy in a dress said something or other to signify that we lost our uncle. I know that most families are not going to visit your grave on the 1-month anniversary, but Uncle Wolfram was a special guy that we all loved a lot. I mean, it was my birthday, but I had no problem with us driving out there to the mausoleum. That's how important Uncle Wolfram was to us. Okay, now you should buckle your safety belts and brace yourselves. Keep your arms and legs inside the roller coaster car, because it's about to get effed up in here. So we have to go see the caretaker of the cemetery first, so that he can unlock the mausoleum for us. My sister and I cracked jokes about it. Why do they lock up the mausoleum? What are people gonna steal from inside there, right? Like, why would anyone go into some other family's mausoleum? It just seems so dumb a thing to us. But we were about to have the smiles wiped off our faces. The caretaker got out his set of keys and walked with us over from his office building to that mausoleum itself. He kept looking at my father really funny, as though he wanted to say something to him, but he never said anything except to answer our questions. He'd answer quickly but politely, and then he'd go back to staring sideways at my dad, studying him as though trying to figure out how to say something to him, or ask something of him. My sister nudged me and pointed this out to me, but I had already noticed the odd behavior. I didn't remember him acting like that 1 month prior. So finally we reached the mausoleum, and the caretaker begins fussing with the keys to open the place up. He finally nervously begins to talk to both of my parents. looking at them from one to the other. He stammered out that there was something that he should probably tell us. And then bam, the door to the mausoleum burst open from the inside. And out of that door ran Lon Chaney as the Wolfman. That's how my sister put it when she told her friends about this, but seriously, it was like a muscular, hairy man who had a head almost like the head of a dog. Or more like a wolf, maybe. It was a monster, though. It was like something out of the dinosaur age or something. I'm trying to say that it wasn't like your pet dog Fido. It was a monstrous man who looked like he had canine features, like the things that you show on your channel. It was one of those things, whatever you call them. I mean, it was a lot scarier than Lon Chaney as the Wolfman, believe me. And it was running right at the group of us. We all dispersed, some to the left, some to the right. And unfortunately, my sister and I ran directly backward, away from the mausoleum and that overly muscled, wolf-headed, furry caveman. Now, I don't know why we did that. I don't think my sister and I are stupid, but that was something that we both agree was a very unintelligent thing to do. We basically needed to step aside, but instead we ran in the same direction that a much faster creature was running in behind us. We probably had more than one chance to step aside, but we were panicking and running on instinct. Well, that is not a very good survival instinct, as both of us got trampled over by the two-legged man-like thing as it ran over and past us through some trees and onto the other side of the cemetery that we couldn't see from our vantage point. The creature landed down hard on my back and completely knocked the wind out of me. It was painful and scary to breathe air back into those lungs, and that was the only thing I could focus on for some time. My sister was fine, because the creature stepped on her giant butt. I mean, she was crying about it, but she cries about everything. Her boyfriend and I have given her a real hard time about it since then, telling her that her butt should be examined for DNA evidence of the Dogman or whatever. Actually, it left an impression in her behind for a few minutes. But that's not really like a footprint that could be seen or analyzed or made a plaster cast out of. I guess its feet weren't too dirty either. When we looked inside the mausoleum, we saw some coffins knocked off of the shelves, but I didn't see any bodies spilled on the floor or anything. The main thing I was looking for when I was inside there was how that creature got into the small structure. I saw no holes in the floors or walls. It seemed to me as though the coffins were all still closed, but I was ushered out of there by the caretaker and my parents quickly, who wanted to see what had happened without me or my sister's help. We waited outside discussing what we had seen, and when the three older people emerged from inside, it looked as though the coffins had been put back into place. We were not invited inside though. It seemed that we were all walking back to the office where the car was parked, without going in there to pay our respects to our recently lost uncle. Nobody was answering my questions, as the caretaker rambled on and on about how he had been hearing sounds coming from inside, and how he was too frightened to go in there and find out what it was. Now, my parents won't discuss any of this, and they won't discuss returning to that cemetery either. They don't even like talking about the old days anymore, if Uncle Wolfram is part of the memory. They've gone radio silent on any subject related to him or the cemetery. My sister and I have plenty of questions though, obviously. Like, how did that creature get into that tiny stone vault? What was that beast anyway? And what was its interest in our family's mausoleum? These are the questions that keep me up at night. These are questions my parents refuse to entertain. And so I'm left with more questions than answers about the Dogman in my family's mausoleum. Come back tomorrow for part 2 of Dogman Problems 2023, right here on Scary Stories NYC. There used to be a country star named Merle Haggard, and our EP today is Patricia Taggart. Please join me in thanking Patricia Tagger for rejoining our channel memberships and making this episode possible. Patricia gets to see our secret members-only episodes, which feature elements we aren't allowed to talk about on his main channel here on YouTube. It's one way you can support the channel and help us stay alive. Another is by picking up some of our merch, such as our new scary Dogman bath shower curtain. If you ever watched The Munsters or The Addams Family, and you saw house guests running in fear from those homes, well, see how your guests react when they open the bathroom door and see a life-size dogman giving them an evil grin from inside. But they are cool, and at over 6 feet, they really are life-size. They're taller than Henry, but he's a shrimp. Anyway, you can get yours today from the link in the description, and hopefully also the image link under this video, if all has gone well on that end. Welcome to Scary Stories. This is part 2 of a collection of 2023 domestic dogman problem stories. These were sent to us by people claiming dogmen or werewolves were interfering with their life in some manner. In fact, we're going to start this off with another story about people seeing dogmen in their own backyard. It might have a similar title, but I assure you this is a quite different story, and we're calling it Another Dogman in Another Backyard. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I must confess I am not sure where to begin with this tale. It was so utterly bizarre, so completely outlandish, that I'm still not certain if it was real or just a feverish hallucination of myself and my partner. But I can tell you this, I'm never going to look at my own backyard the same way again. It all started on a warm summer evening. I was sitting on the patio with my partner enjoying a glass of Merlot in the last of the daylight. We were chatting and laughing, completely oblivious to the horror that was about to unfold. Suddenly my partner Trevor stopped talking and let out a low gasp. He was staring over my shoulder, his eyes wide with surprise, and perhaps something else. I turned around, and I saw what he was looking at. In the middle of our backyard, standing perfectly still, was the most terrifying creature I had ever seen. It was huge, at least 7 feet tall, with the muscular build of a weightlifting gorilla, as if such a thing could exist. Now, I don't go for that steroid look. I'm not really into muscles. I find big guys threatening. But it wasn't a gorilla, nor was it a man either. It had the head of a wolf, with sharp teeth and piercing, glowing yellow devil eyes. I froze in terror. My partner Trevor, however, seemed to have a different reaction. He stood up and started walking toward the beast. I gasped in utter shock at his behavior. "Hey there, big fella," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "What's your name?" The werewolf didn't respond. It just stared at my partner with its unthinking animal eyes. "Come on," my partner said, "don't be shy. We're not gonna hurt you." "Good Lord, Trevor," I shouted, "tell him we have a gun. Frighten the beast away, don't invite him in." But naughty Trevor ignored me, and he took another step closer to the most overly muscled man I'd ever seen. Or not a man, but you know what I mean. The werewolf growled, a low rumbling sound that sent a chill down my spine, but only seemed to annoy Trevor. "I said we're not gonna hurt you," my partner repeated, his voice firmer this time. "We'll just come over here and say hello." The werewolf hesitated for a moment. Then he actually obeyed my silly guy and started walking toward my partner Trevor. I couldn't believe it. Was Trevor actually going to try to pet this thing? What were his intentions toward this large cryptid anyway? The dogman stopped in front of my partner and sniffed him, curiously, which caused Trevor to erupt in girlish giggles. Then it reached out its massive paw and touched my partner's arm. My partner smiled and stroked the werewolf's fur. "Who's a good boy?" asked Trevor. "You're a good boy," he answered himself. I watched in disbelief as my partner bonded with a North American upright canid or dogman. It was like they were old friends, or maybe even something more. But then in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The werewolf suddenly snarled and snapped at my partner's arm. Trevor jerked back, startled. The werewolf lunged at him, its dinosaur monster teeth bared, and the smell of rotted meat filling our backyard. I screamed in terror. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen with fear. Or really, I was jumping up and down in place and whooping it up loudly. I mean, this was a terrible development, and I was quite frantic about expressing my discomfort. But my partner Trevor was quick thinking, for a change. He turned and ran toward the house, which really was a brilliant decision. If I could have remained calmer, that's perhaps what I might have done as well. Trevor reached the back door and fumbled with the keys, as I ran desperately after him. The werewolf was getting closer, but he seemed in no rush about chasing us. In spite of Trevor's affectionate behavior, the monster man seemed to want to corral us back into our house. I could hear its heavy paws pounding on the ground behind me as it snarled and whined at us in a threatening manner. Then finally the door opened, and we slipped back inside. Trevor slammed the door shut and locked it, then collapsed into my arms, weeping and sobbing uncontrollably. He was apologizing for putting both our lives at risk, but he said he was risking it all for love. As unhappy as I was with Trevor, I reassured him, and I told him that it was okay. The foolish boy had made a mistake, but he was erring on the side of love, and I can't blame a man for that. He must have seen those huge pectoral muscles, and all concept that this wasn't actually a human flew out of our Trevor's ears. I had to forgive him. I can be just as impetuous in my own way. The dogman began crashing into the door to frighten us, but it held firm. We stood there for a moment, catching our breath. Then Trevor turned to me and said, "I think we should get out of here." I nodded in agreement, but I had no idea where we should go. I found myself too frightened to think clearly. We quickly gathered our things and ran out the front door, with that muscular beast man out back. We didn't stop running until we reached the safety of our car. First, we locked the doors and rolled up the windows. Then, we sat there in silence, trying to comprehend what had just happened. I had thought Trevor planned on driving away, but it seemed his plan was to sit in the car and stare back at the house. I looked back at our house as well, along with Trevor. The werewolf was nowhere to be seen, but I knew it was still out there somewhere, lurking in the shadows. After a while, I suggested some places we could get a nice dinner, and Trevor drove me to one of our favorite bistros. In the days that followed, we couldn't stop thinking about what we had seen. We talked about it endlessly, trying to make sense of it, but there was no obvious explanation presenting itself. It was as if the werewolf had simply appeared out of thin air. We started to do some research on werewolves and dogmen. We read all the books and articles we could find, but nothing we read really could explain what we had seen. The dogman we had seen was different from any werewolf described in folklore or legend. It was bigger, it was stronger, and more ferocious, and it was definitely not afraid of humans. We started to wonder if we were the only ones who had seen this muscle-bound werewolf. We talked to our neighbors, but they hadn't seen it. It was as if we were the only ones who were aware of its existence. And then we found your channel, with the stories of the Giga Chad Dogman, who is so absurdly over-muscular. Now we have a name for what we saw, and a new favorite scary YouTube channel. We live in an eastern suburb of Pittsburgh, and I'm telling you, the Pennsylvania werewolf is not only real, but honey, he is swole. A dogman was living in my attic for weeks. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've got a wife who loves paranormal TV shows, and so when we experienced bumping up in our attic, she jumped to the conclusion that we had a ghost up there. For this reason, she kept me from going up there and looking around for weeks, and the situation got worse. Because you see, we didn't have a ghost up there at all. We had a dogman, bringing his nightly kills into our attic so he could dine in peace. I'll tell you the story of how we eventually found out about it. Okay, so my wife is big and brave about a lot of things, but bumps in the night is not on that list. So when she woke me up so that I could hear the bumping and thumping going on upstairs, I had no problem jumping out of bed and heading over to the attic entrance. Only my wife Deirdre stopped me. She told me I couldn't go up there because I was not an official paranormal investigator. I asked her why she got me up if she didn't want me to do anything about it, and we both started arguing. So, days stretched into weeks, and I wasn't allowed up in my own attic because my wife was trying to get a local Michigan paranormal team to come out to investigate. She started by asking the more famous ones, and they recommended less famous ones to her. Then negotiations began with several different teams, and as it dragged on, we weren't getting much sleep. I started taking naps at my job, which was embarrassing, and everyone thought my wife and I were breaking up or something. When I told them it was because my wife thought we had a ghost, they were like, "Oh, sure, a ghost." I couldn't wait for Deirdre to get someone out there, so I could find out if it was a raccoon or what it was. I really didn't think it was a ghost. I didn't hear chains rattling or moaning from up there, and all the sounds I did hear could have been made by an animal of some sort. I wanted to go have a look, then call out some expert to remove the animal or animals. Now my wife, on the other hand, was researching all the former owners of this house to find out which spirit was haunting us. She said there was no way it was an ordinary animal, and I said there was no way it was a ghost. I suppose we were both a little bit right. So the night came when the ghost hunting team showed up in their van with their cameras and computers, and they started moving equipment into the house. While I was standing out front watching their procedures, my neighbor came over to see what all the fuss was about. When I told him, he informed me that he could actually see a hole in my attic from his second-story bedroom window. He said he kept forgetting to tell me about it, and he was sort of afraid to bring it up because he didn't want to be rude. He was kind of surprised that I didn't know about it, so I told him how my wife hadn't allowed me up in the attic for over a month. The leader of the ghost hunting crew was very interested in this conversation, and he asked if he could go have a look out of that neighbor's window. I went with them, and soon the three of us found ourselves looking over at a hole big enough for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to walk through comfortably. It was a miracle the roof on that side of the house hadn't caved in already. It took me a few minutes to pull my jaw up off the ground, while the ghost hunter guy informed me that I had an infestation of some kind of an animal, but not a ghost. We went downstairs and he told his people to pack the van back up, and that the hunt was called off. My wife was extremely unhappy about this, and she was running around on our lawn shouting at everybody. The team leader, our neighbor Jim, and myself all told her exactly what I just told you, but it didn't calm her down in the slightest. She demanded the ghost hunt go on, but the leader told her that the hole he had seen in our roof was quite large, and he didn't know what kind of an animal was up there, since he didn't have insurance for his team covering animal attacks. It wasn't safe or logical for him to keep his team in our home. He was making sense to everyone but my enraged wife Deirdre, who was now saying she was gonna go to the attic and do her own investigation. So our neighbor Jim and I went up to the attic with her, since she was only gonna get herself bitten by something if we didn't. To get to our attic, you have to climb these narrow stairs, then climb through a doorway that's actually smaller than the hole I saw in our roof. I'm not sure Kareem could fit through this hole, but none of us had to even try to squeeze in there that night, since as soon as I unlocked the door, a very large dog burst out along with the most sickening smell of death that I have ever experienced. and that surprise combination sent the three of us tumbling back down that staircase, banging every single part of our bodies into every single other part, and the walls, and the stairs, and the ceiling. And when we finished our painful fall and looked back up, we saw that this dog that was snarling at us and trying to get through toward us was too big to fit through that doorway. I was just kidding about Kareem before. A large man would need to be extremely overweight not to fit through this doorway, although you will have to crawl through for certain. Well, this dog couldn't crawl through, and it had the strangest looking front leg and paw. It was reaching one front leg through, trying to pull itself into the stairway, then pulling that leg back and putting the other one through instead. Honestly, they looked more like arms than the front legs of a dog, and his paws were an awful lot like hands with sharp claws. This dog wasn't just big, it was strange looking. So maybe he was some kind of a wolf that I just hadn't heard of. Maybe it was an extra large kind of a coyote, I wouldn't know. I don't think it was ever anyone's pet, as it looked at us like we were food. There was no compassion in those eyes. There was only bloodlust. And rather than even trying to go up there and close that door again, we padlocked the door to the staircase and moved a heavy bookcase in front of that door. As soon as I could, I had animal removal people come out, but the dog was not here when they arrived. We went up there and saw the mess the creature had left, and for your sake I'm not even going to describe it to you. I already told you what that canine had been using our attic for. I hired the neighbor's kid to help me clean that up, and I'm not even going to tell you how much it cost to have some guys come out and do emergency repairs on our roof. I mean, the Dogman is one level of scary, and the price of those repairs, that was scary on a much higher level. So now we know about the Dogman, and I listen to some of the shows on your channel sometimes. You know, at the end where people say stuff about how they've learned not to enter those woods, or they learned not to camp alone or whatever? Well, the lesson I learned from all this is that the next time my wife thinks she's hearing a ghost in a part of our house, I'm going to go investigate that part of the house immediately. I am never waiting a month to find out what is going bump in the night ever again. Werewolf in the basement. Dear Scary Stories NYC. We had been living in our modest country home for 10 years and owned it outright for the past 3, before my wife woke me up one night to tell me about the thumping in the basement. Half asleep, I stumbled out of bed and down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the basement door, I could hear the thumping more clearly. It was a deep, heavy sound, like someone was hitting the floor with a large object. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The basement was dark, but I could make out the outline of a large figure in the corner. It was hunched over, its back to me. As I got closer, I could see that it was covered in thick brown fur. It was huge, easily over 7 feet tall. I took another step closer and the creature turned to face me. It had the head of a bear, but with more canine ears. Its eyes were glowing golden. It had long, sharp claws. I froze in terror because this was something even scarier than a bear. I had never seen anything quite like it before. The creature stared at me for a long moment, then turned and lumbered back into the corner. It sat down and resumed its thumping. I stood there for a few more seconds, my mind racing. What was this thing? What was it doing in my basement? And how was I going to get it to leave? I knew I couldn't just leave it there. It was too dangerous. But I also knew that I couldn't fight it. It was too big and too strong. I decided that I needed to come up with a plan. I backed out of the basement and closed the door behind me. I went back upstairs and I woke up my wife. I told her what I'd seen, and she was just as horrified as I was. We spent the rest of the night brainstorming ideas on how to get the creature out of the basement. We considered everything from calling the police to trying to trap it and release it into the woods. Finally, we decided on a plan. We would try to lure the creature out of the basement with food. We gathered up some scraps of meat and cheese from the kitchen, and I went back downstairs. I opened the door to the basement and I called out to the creature. "Here, boy," I said. "Come and get it." And then I tossed the food to the bottom of the staircase. The creature looked up to me, then got to its feet and started walking toward me. I slowly backed away, getting ready to run if I needed to. The creature reached the food and started to eat, tearing the meat with its sharp teeth and claws. Once it had finished eating, the creature looked up at me again. It seemed to be considering something. Then it turned and walked back into the corner. It sat down and resumed its thumping. I was disappointed. I thought that maybe it would follow me out of the basement, but I guess I was wrong. I closed the basement door and went back upstairs. I told my wife what had happened, and we decided to wait until the morning to try again. The next morning, I went back downstairs to the basement. I opened the door and called out to the creature, but there was no answer. I stepped inside and looked around. The creature was gone. I was relieved, but also confused. Where had it gone to? Why had it left so suddenly? I mean, I suspect it was a dogman, but I never really found out what the creature was or where it came from. I do know its movements were surprisingly graceful for such a large and powerful thing. When it looked at me, I felt like it could see right into my soul. I still have nightmares about that creature sometimes. I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. I can see its golden glowing eyes, and I can hear its deep rumbling growl. I know that it's gone, but I can't help but feel that that bear-like dogman is still out there somewhere, waiting for me. We couldn't live without them, I suppose. I'm talking about S.A. Rose. Please join me in thanking S.A. Rose, one of our top-tier PayPal Club members. S.A. Rose gets to see our secret uncensored Dogman and Werewolf stories, of which we put out 4 each month for members only. You can become a PayPal Club member at peterbernard.com, or a channel member right here on YouTube by clicking the join button. If you missed yesterday's show, we've got this cool new life-size Dogman shower curtain that we're selling at the link in the description. I'm trying to tag the videos with the item, but it doesn't always work. In either case, the link is in the description if you'd like to make your bathroom a little bit scarier. A lot bit scarier. And speaking of scary, here comes our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com, or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.